Pardon, öyle bir uzun oldu.
Sorry, it has taken. I wish I had sent a video so that I wouldn't have to answer any questions. Anyway, well, when I was asked to speak to you at this panel, I really stopped and thought. You know, what does post-growth society mean for Turkey? I mean, even though you're an activist in this field, it's very difficult to imagine what it would be like, what post-growth in Turkey would be like. So I had really trouble coming up with a funky sort of title. I wish I named it something cooler to give you some great ideas, but I named it Whereabouts is post-growth in Turkey? That's what I called my presentation. And not only in Turkey, but also for the future, I want to inspire some discussion, hopefully. If I'm too fast, please wave at me. This is a request for the interpreters. Now, questioning growth in Turkey is where we get stuck at. We need to stop and think about this. Federico, when he was speaking today, and when he talked yesterday, hello, he talked about why we need degrowth. That's clear. That's well articulated. We need degrowth, yes. We also have public opposition, yes. But how are we going to do this is what we should more focus on. That's what he said. I think in Turkey we're not at that point, or not really, let's say. And that is what we first of all need to do. Now, looking at the overall situation, how valid, how realistic can degrowth be, or what the limitations of degrowth are, etc., are usually discussed from a financial perspective. So, is degrowth possible under capitalism? Can you talk about capital accumulation and degrowth? Can you meet the needs, eradication of poverty, etc., etc.? So, for financial closure of certain things, will this be possible? That's how people discuss degrowth. But in the Turkish context, I think before we discuss these things, we should focus on the public imagination. I mean, okay, let's say that financially speaking, this is possible and we come up with the limitations, etc. But what can we do in Turkey from the political perspective? How can we transform this from a political perspective? That's what we need to think about, because it's like there are some other people who want to grow, who are not part of our society. I mean, we should stop pretending that it's not us who wants to grow, but someone else. And also in the public sphere, we should see how we can go beyond, but we should break that public sphere in order to make this happen. And then the strategy will follow. Now, in every country, yes, growth is being idealized. Maybe in every society we might see that this is very much idealized, but particularly in the Turkish context, there's a relationship between the state and the society which is particular. Starting with the Turkish Republic, well, even at the last phases of the Ottoman Empire, Westernization became a fetish, and economic growth has a privileged position. When you look at the Turkish state-society history, this is what we see. Economic growth has always been the most important and the only actually objective of policymakers. Let's grow first and deal with inequalities later on environmental costs later on. Of course, it's not only exclusive to Turkey, but what is exclusive to Turkey is that no player ever has questioned this so far. Everyone is pro-development in Turkey for such a long time. So there is the undebatable discussion of growth. So the policy discussion is always about how to grow, not about not to grow, in the Gandhi sense of the word. So there is no alternative to growth, so to speak. And I think that this is such a strong understanding because of a Gramsci sort of perspective in terms of the building of the state, because consent to the state focuses on the yes, let me try to explain it based on collective interest. People show economic growth as though it were for the benefit for everyone. Of course, this is something fictitious, but the state says, and I am the player, and this is how they get the consent of the people. So, consent versus coercion. This is why the state-society relationship should be questioned, and only then will degrowth be possible for the Turkish scenario. Well, how do we see the attraction of growth in the local panorama? Now, first of all, there is there's something that we have memorized, but we were taught to memorize this. Development versus environment. This is a binary opposition that people keep talking about in different ways. When you look at the local ecology efforts, we always see this binary opposition. You're either going to protect your environment or you're going to create employment. So choose one. Or, well, we want to object to it, but they will give us jobs and the land doesn't give us anything. So that is the coercion of the rural growers or farmers or population in general. So before taking this for granted, I think we have to delve deeper into this. If people would not need employment, if they were not leaving their property, then this binary opposition wouldn't be so strong anyway. I mean, it's part of the economical and political relationship, this sort of binary opposition. That's number one. Number two, the collective interest is something very strong, particularly in Artvin, in terms of the hydropower plants and in terms of dams. Here's what I see. In Artvin, there are 3 really big dams and people show consent to it. But to hydropower plants, there is a huge opposition. But why do they consent to the dams? When you ask them why they consent to the dams, they say the state has built the dams and it must mean that they mean it well. So I give something with a dam over here so that Turkey grows in general, and someone else in another region in Turkey will accept a dam so that collective interest grows. I mean, they don't call it collective interest, of course, but that's what they mean. So that's why they consent to a dam. But actually, not everyone devotes themselves to this collective interest, and this is what we should show them. This is what we should politicize on, I believe. So, when collecting what I said all together, I will focus on 3 main things. The first one, which I want to mainly emphasize actually, when we go through a transition to a post-growth society, we should have a general political line, and we should focus on financial relationships and societal imagination, and we should have a political line to question the legitimacy of growth. We should come up with alternative economies. Morris Scott actually talked about this, so maybe I'll build on that. Now, let's deconstruct growth. That growth is not a collective interest, actually. How can we do this? I mean, it's obvious that the benefits of growth are distributed in an inegalitarian manner. I think this is clear for us, and this is clear for the layman too. However, it's more than the distribution of income only. People keep talking about the need for energy, right? Which legitimizes so many energy projects. Who uses energy? There's also an unequal distribution in terms of energy use, an unequal distribution in terms of use of time, an unequal distribution in terms of using access to health, etc. So it's not only about economic inequality, which is about prosperity and income. There's so many other facets of inequality which touches people's lives. When talking about the unequal distribution of growth, people do not talk about the costs of growth, actually. The economists should talk about these things more. Why do some villages get these energy projects whereas other villages do not? And this will, I think, bring together societal opposition movements, because Soma accident, the mine disaster, was something which has brought opposition together, because that is the growth, that is the cost of growth, that is the expense of growth, and the flex security of women's labor is one of them too. If we're going to politicize and criticize this, then all the societal opposition movements should join hands. I mean, it won't be like talking about it. We should really go on the street and make it happen. Now, there are two areas which we can make this happen: energy and construction. These are the two areas which have been debated at most. Now, another important thing is, how can we forget what was taught us to memorize? Because this is a material, a very burning need for reality, actually. Here I suggest the establishment of alternative economic structures, and many rural farmers actually are resisting to this, but still, in an environmental project, the rural people who are opposing to a project will only be meaningful if you form an economic relation with them and offer them an alternative income. So it's important that there is an exchange with the farmer without any intermediaries. And a predictable and organized demand is also important, and we should be able to support their economies. Now, here's an example. In Istanbul, there's a group that makes it happen. They show solidarity with the resisting producer and the resisting consumers together. In short, the collective movement is called dürtük, and it's about shopping without an intermediary in between. Supporting livelihood economies is also important. This is what we should make happen, because people want to access food, but they should not have to go through the market to make it happen. Because if you sell your produce in the market, then that also means abusing or exploitation of labor. So livelihood economies should be supported. How much time do I have? So that was what Maurice Scott also said. All of these things should be questioned. Whom does growth serve? Whose needs does it serve? And at what expense do we grow? And then political line around growth. So a revisiting of the economy, the whole economy, the buying, economic decisions, organizations, etc. The economic sphere and what it looks like, we should think about that again. An economy is a very political area. That's what we need to underline over and over again. It seems like economic decisions are about efficiency, the maximization of profit, etc. That's what economics says. But when you look at the politics of economy, economy is an area of necessity. We should think about efficiency, we should think about profitability, etc. That's how economy works. But I am saying that economy can be re-established as an ethical and a political arena. So we should be able to say, no, profitability and efficiency are not that all that there is to economy. Molly Scott also talked about this. She also said, thinking about our needs. Yes, our needs, investment, what to invest in and why, etc. So all these decisions are very political decisions and very ethical decisions too. These are not economical decisions only. That is what we should remember once again and embrace this as a whole. Molly Scott said these things, but I'll make an addition. Well, as an individual, you can also do more than just ask, what do I really need? If you make it spread around the society, then that is more important. I mean, it should have a societal return for my individual stance. And that's how the mechanism should be defined again. And what will that mechanism look like? The democratic decision-making mechanisms. Decision mechanisms should be open to all stakeholders. When a factory is deciding for their policies, they can not only ask the workers, but the people in the region, people who buy from that factory, should also participate some way in the decision-making mechanism. Well, what I'm saying is not brand new, by the way. I mean, revisiting or rethinking economic arena and bringing the political perspective to it comes from the collective economy understanding. democratic decision-making mechanism and active participation comes from an economic discussion which got stuck between planning, central planning, or participation, etc. So from the conceptual perspective, we have many tools at hand, so let's keep the discussion then. Thank you.